All right. We are still in the series of Revelation. We are coming to the end of the book. We've been going through it all year long. And so today will be chapter 20 of the 22 chapter book of the Revelation of John. So we are coming to the end of one of the most, I wouldn't use the word confusing, but one of the most difficult, complicated, in-depth books of the Bible. There's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of literalism, there's a lot of prophetic, there's so much going on in this book that it has a lot of people arguing a lot of the time. But that's not our goal, isn't to be right. Our goal isn't to figure out what this, that, and the other meant. Our goal comes from 2 Peter 3:11 through 13 that says, it's what kind of people ought we to be? In light of what this is, the revelation of Jesus, the second coming of Christ, how ought we to live now? That's the question we've been searching for. That's the question we've been asking all year is what kind of person, what kind of follower of Jesus are we supposed to be? How should we be living our life in light of the revelation? Not can we be right about the revelation? We're trying to see how does this apply to my life today? This revelation, what Jesus is calling the end of this world that we know, how does it affect me today? How can I grow and lean closer and walk better with Jesus now? Have you ever had a loss in your life that hit you harder than you expected? Or have you ever had just way more emotion about something that was lost than you expected? I had a friend, his name was Jack Stevens, and he was homeless. He didn't have a house. Part of it was by choice. He had some mental illnesses and chose not to take medications because he didn't like them, and he knew the ramifications of those choices, and he made it anyways. I walked with him through that, but our relationship started when I was selling cars. I saw this man pushing a cart because the car dealership was right next to a recycling center. And so I saw this man every day, and I would talk to him as he walked, and his feet were kind of worse for wear, and he didn't have good shoes. And so I had made some money that day selling cars, and so I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to Sports Authority and buy a pair of shoes. You know, Sports Authority wasn't very expensive back in the day, so I got him a nice pair of Nikes, and I gave them to him. And then this is where my heart and the giving started to pop up, and I had to learn a valuable lesson in this. After I gave him the shoes, I didn't see him wearing the shoes. And I got really mad. I got really mad that I gave this man who didn't have good shoes, brand new shoes, and he wasn't wearing them. I realized that he was saving them until his shoes were no longer wearable. I found out later, and that's when my heart needed a recalibration. My heart needed shifted. My heart needed changed because I was prejudging. I was acting as the judge in this, and I didn't have all the information. I didn't have all the details. I didn't have the right or the position or the information to make those choices, make those judgments. Later, we become close. After I stopped selling cars, I went into the ministry, and our friendship maintained. It even grew as I was working at a church in town, and he would also walk that way. Through there. So I got to know Jack really well. We became friends. It got to a point where I had to humble myself and let him buy me dinner sometimes because he got mad that we weren't true friends if he wasn't a give and take relationship. And so we were close. I knew where he slept. I knew where he lived. I knew what he did. I give him rides. I even let him hold my newborn son. Like, we were close. This man became a friend of mine. And then I found out one day that he had passed away. I found out one day that he tragically froze to death. And he was a friend, but I kind of knew at some point this was going to happen, so I was prepared for it, or so I thought. But that tragedy, that loss, hit me a lot harder than I expected. I'm not a crier. You can ask me, I do not cry that much. I don't know if something's broken in me or what, but I couldn't stop crying when I found out about my friend Jack. It hit me so much harder than I anticipated. And I believe there's a reason because of the human life and the loss is so much different than we expect. There's so much more to it, and I think we all can understand the depth and the gravity of each other. There's something that's different about humans. Or have you ever had to get rid of something to make room for something new? Have you ever had to do that? My mom is a bit of a hoarder, in my opinion. I'm a bit of a minimalist. And so she doesn't make room for the new. She just puts the old in a box in the garage, in the closet. She puts it away and then gets something new. And I'm like, why don't you just get rid of the old? So it's a little banter between my mom and I. But Jill made me sell my bike before I bought a new bike. I had to sell my bike before I could buy a new bike. That was our agreement. But I was like, well, if I buy the bike first, then I don't have to stop riding, and I could probably not have to worry about how much or how quick I had to sell my bike to replenish the money that I spent on the new bike. But she knows my tricks. She knows my games. So she makes me sell my bike before I could buy a new bike. She made me sell my surfboard before I could buy a new surfboard, my golf clubs before I could buy new golf clubs. I don't know but guitars, she makes me sell a guitar before I buy a new guitar. I'm telling you guys, pray for me. Pray for me. She makes me sell my stuff before I buy new stuff. And I don't know if you're noticing a pattern here. Jill makes me make room for the new. Jill's more like Jesus than I am. Jill's more like Jesus than I am. See, Jesus has this thing about making things new and making room for new things in our lives. Jesus has this way about removing the old, taking away the old so that the new can come. And we get this from Hebrews 1 through 2. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets and many times in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. We are in the last days, and I don't mean that in an ominous, like, end of the world way. I mean, it's the last days are the time from when Jesus to when Jesus comes back. We're sandwiched between Jesus and Jesus. It's probably the best sandwich you'll ever have. But we're looking at the Revelation, like I said, we're not looking to discover or analyze or dissect the symmetry, the symbols and the meanings of all this. We're looking to see, how does this apply? What can I get from this? How ought I to live? And an author named Joshua Ryan Butler says this: religion is not a safe place to hide from God. The book of Revelation gets uncomfortable. And religion is not a safe place to hide from God. The Pharisees tried to do that. They tried to safeguard themselves behind rules and regulations and order and religion to hide their heart from God. But when you dig into the book of Revelation, it makes me uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable with some of the content that I read. And I know that the Bible is the truth, so I'm the problem. I need to grow closer to God and come under his design, not mine. So if you were with us last week, the persecution is over, right? We see in chapter 19 that the persecution comes to an end. The battle has been fought, and then now there's this space, there's this opening, right? And now it's time for justice to be restored. But before that, after the battle, there's some housekeeping that needs done. There's some cleanup. There's some old that needs removed to make room for this new, right? So we're going to get into chapter 20. There's 15 verses, so I'm going to read them in some sections and some chunks, and then we're going to talk about it, and then we got some observations and some points that hopefully will apply to your life. I know it applied to mine, but hopefully I'm not just that weird to where I'm the only one that's getting something out of this. Because if it is, talk to me. You can email my boss, Danny, at discoverhope.church. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key to the abyss and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil, or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed over it to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until 1,000 years had ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time. I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given authority to judge. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or its images and had not received its mark on their foreheads or on their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until 1,000 years had ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, and they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him for 1,000 years. It's the first 6 verses. Kind of heavy. A lot going on there. A lot going on there. Interesting. And a lot of times over the years, as you might imagine, this 1,000 years has been a big topic of debate, a big topic of conversation. And in my opinion, misplaced topic of conversation. I don't need to know, this is me talking, I don't need to know if the 1,000 years is literal, figurative, pre, post, happening yet, happening current, already happened. I don't need to know that. That doesn't really change my relationship with Jesus, right? That's me. But there's these 3 main views, and that's a premillennial, a postmillennial, and an amillennial. And those are, it's already happened, it's going to happen, it's figurative, or it's literal. Those are the differences. And these different views about the millennium don't need to cause this division or controversy in the church, because each view acknowledges what is crucial about Christianity. What is crucial is that Christ will return, defeat Satan, and reign forever. All 3 of those perspectives, all of these views on that, agree on the big stuff. Let's major in the majors. Let's major in the major topics. I mean, with a friend having a theological discussion, yeah, it might be fun to discuss the 1,000 years. I've had some enjoyment over that. But when we're talking about what really matters, is that Christ is coming back. Christ is defeating Satan, and Christ is going to reign forever. So I guess I choose to be more of a pan-millennial, where everything pans out in the end. You can laugh at that, it's okay. But here, and this is where I get that. This is where I get that belief. This is where I get that idea. Is Jesus himself said, no one knows the day or the hour. If there was a formula or an algorithm or an equation that could figure out when Christ was coming back, then it would make Jesus a liar. I don't believe Jesus is a liar. I believe he is truth. And so if he says no one knows the time or the hour, logic tells me that I'm kind of spinning wheels and wasting time trying to figure out this 1,000-year debate, when there's other things that are far more pressing, far more important, far more transformational in my life than this 1,000-year debate. And then here's the judgment of Satan going into verses 7 through 10. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out and deceive the nations in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them for battle. In number, they are like the sands of the seashore. They marched across the breadths of the earth and surrounded the camps of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever. See, that sounds heavy, that sounds dark, but it's really good news for us. It's really good news that Jesus is going to fight your battle for you. Jesus is going to conquer the essence of evil, the embodiment. Jesus, the Holy One, is going to eradicate evil from your midst. That's good news. It might not be the way you think it should go, but if I could step on your toes for a second, your opinion doesn't really matter when it comes to God's decisions. I've had to learn that over the years, that my opinion and God's will don't line up all the time. And I have to be okay with that. See, Francis Chan, he's a pretty famous author and pastor. I love this quote that he has, and he was talking to young people, which young people, you can say some radical stuff to young people, and they just kind of roll with the punches. It's one of the coolest things about teaching to youth or young adults is they just kind of roll with it. But we value our opinion far too much. There's too much of a value on our opinion in our society, and that's one of our biggest problems. If you look at the things that we have in our life, that we can share our opinions, it's staggering to think about the value that we place on that. Yelp reviews. We value so much the Yelp review. Whether we're writing it or reading it, it will dictate what we do, the choices that we make. Our opinion is almost a false god in our society. C.S. Lewis says this: there are only two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says in the end, "Thy will be done." All that are in hell choose it. Without that self-choice, there would be no hell. Opinion, free will, and choice are one of the biggest blessings for humanity and one of the most difficult things to navigate. Our life is a compilation of choices. And God chose to give us free will for true love. That was the exchange. Free will for true love. Now, I have a Roomba that I don't like. I don't believe a robot can love me. I don't believe I can genuinely love a robot. I don't care how good the artificial intelligence is. True love is different. True love is a choice. My wife is amazing, but there's days I have to choose love. Because I wake up sometimes, the coffee's not made, and I choose violence. Like, it's a real struggle, but the real love is that she chose me too. If she did not have a choice in our relationship, I would not feel loved. God exchanged your free will for true love. And talking about hell, though, is like talking about shadows with never mentioning the light. See, this God that we serve, this Jesus who paid the price for you, came on a redemption, a rescue mission, because they were aware of the cost and the exchange. And the free will and the love would cost Jesus his life. That's how important we are. That's how valuable you are to God. Maybe we should have more weight on his opinion than our own. Then here's the judgment of the dead as we wrap up the chapter. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. The earth and the heavens fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and the death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. And each person was judged according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire as well. Now see, this is where it hit me. This is where it hit me. I'm not here to debate about hell or what is hell. Is it a literal fire? Is it a symbolic fire? I'm not here to debate about that. I'm here to plead and beckon you that there are real people going to hell, and there's something you can do about it. God has chosen you to do something about this problem. That's what it's about. It's about God making room for the new. God has created in me a new life. He had to make room for that. I had to die to myself. I had to die to my sin to make room for the life of God to breathe through me. He's making room for the new. And in this moment, he's cleaning up the mess of humanity to make room to bring heaven to earth. He's cleaning up our mess once again. He's making us sell the bike before we get the new bike. So I have some questions. How does this change the way we live now? How does this information, I'm sorry, but once you have heard this information, you are no longer off the hook. You can no longer play ignorant. How does this change the way we live our life? It should change the way you live your life. It's changing the way I live my life. I'm not always doing it right, but I'm trying. Well, I think we ought to live like eternity is at stake. Not just our time here, not just our days, not just our hours and minutes, but eternity. You can debate all you want about what hell is and what heaven looks like, but all I know is one has God and one doesn't, and I know what choice I've made. Do you remember when someone shared Jesus with you? Can you remember that? Now, it's hard for me to remember that because my parents are pastors and they shared Jesus with me from like day one. I was born on Saturday in church on Sunday. But I remember the people who lived Jesus to me when I was difficult, when I was a know-it-all 16-year-old teenager who had a chip on his shoulder and anger problems and substance abuse issues. I know who showed me Jesus. I know who lived like Jesus around me. And I know who said that they believed in Jesus, and I watched their life and I saw no Jesus. I know those moments. Do you remember the first time you stepped in faith to introduce someone else to Jesus? It's one of the coolest things is being a part of children's ministry or vacation Bible schools or youth ministry is watching a young one make that decision. It's one of the most life-giving moments I've ever experienced. Hearing the voice of a child cry out to God. Do you remember when you introduced someone to Jesus? You see, compassion and heartbreak should be the engine behind evangelism. Too often we get holier than thou, we get self-righteous, we get angry, we want to win. I'm a competitive person. I like winning. But I want to win people over. I don't want to win an argument. I've never seen anyone argue someone to Jesus. It might have happened, I've just never seen it. But I have seen people loved to Jesus, shown mercy, grace, and kindness to Jesus. In fact, it's his kindness that leads us to redemption. Compassion and heartbreak for a person who doesn't know their Creator needs to be the engine behind our evangelism. Not checking a box for Christianity, not doing what the pastor told me to do, not because it's comfortable or I want to make a new friend or I want to do the... We got to get to a place where we are so lost and so desperate and so broken for people to find Jesus that we don't care anymore what people might think of us, what people might say or how uncomfortable it is. You got to get to a point where it's worth it because someone got to that point for you. If you're sitting here today and you have a relationship with Jesus, someone was uncomfortable on the path to that relationship. So our first observation is that love is the reason. So we read about this episode of Revelation, and we understand that there's this real hell, and real people are going to go there. And then I ask myself a lot of questions, why? What's the reason? What's the purpose? Well, like we said earlier, is that true love was the exchange for free will. Love is the reason. Love is the reason for this. For this clearing of evil from the earth, that the reason is love. God loves you so much that he wants to rid evil forever. He created us for love and to give us free will, but you can opt out. It's like you can unsubscribe to this email. And our second point is that righteousness is the reality. Love is the reason for this, but righteousness, God's righteousness, that's the reality of ridding evil, eradicating evil, is because for God's presence to really dwell here and be amongst us like it promised, there can be no darkness. the light will expel all darkness. And that's the reality, is that God is so righteous that without the covering of Jesus, we can't be there. And so that's why Jesus came, is to bring us, to bridge that gap, to mend that fence. But it's the reality. You see, I don't know if you've ever had I think they're called toxic relationships now. Have you ever had a toxic relationship, whether it's a friend, coworker, significant other? But a lot of times those toxicities dwell and grow and feast on a lack of boundaries. You see, real, healthy, good love is not boundaryless. There's parameters, there's safeguards, there's boundaries on that love. And that's part of the drive for this, is that God loves us, that he wants to protect us. There's boundaries for love to be flourishing and to be safe and to be healthy. And then the third is that justice is the ramification. Love is the reason, righteousness is the reality, and justice is the ramification. The heartbreaking moment, the heartbreaking aspect of this is that God gives people free will, and some people freely choose not to choose Jesus. And the justice of God, his righteousness and his justice to uphold that standard with the free gift of Jesus, will honor and respect those choices at all costs. God loves and respects you so much that he will honor your choice to not be close to him. And it's that justice that he upholds is the ramification of your decision. I'm heartbroken over this reality. This is an area where sometimes God and I get into disagreements and discussions over. I don't always agree with this because I'm not just. I'm not righteous. And I don't know everything. And so I think, in my opinion, in my ideas, in my utopia that I've pictured in my head, that God should do something different. And every time we have those discussions, sometimes I agree to disagree and move on. But there's times where God reveals to me some reasons. And he's revealed to me through my own life reasons. And then encourages me to get out there and be a reason that someone meets Jesus. How will this change the way you live? That's a rhetorical question. I don't need your answer. We're not going to have a test at the end of this. But I want you to be asking yourself that this week, and as we continue, how does this information change the way you live? How was your day going to be different? And this is an interesting story that I heard this week that is so cool, because I think it paints this beautiful picture of what God is going to do with the world. If you're into jazz music or piano, you might know this name. His name is Keith Jarrett. He has one of the most solo jazz live all-time best-selling albums. And it was recorded live in Cologne, Germany in 1975. And he's known for he's an amazing jazz piano player. And he's known to just walk up. Each concert is never the same because he just plays. He doesn't play songs. He just plays. And he's so creative and he's so good. And this concert was recorded, and it was one of the best, it's the best-selling solo jazz piano album ever. And it almost didn't happen. Do you know why it almost didn't happen? Because when he got there to rehearse and practice and play on the piano in Cologne, Germany, I think it was for 1,400 people. The poor little piano. It was out of tune. The keys were broken. Keys were sticking. The felt on the pads was all rubbed off, so all of the high registers sounded really tinny. And the keys were not evenly weighted, so some you had to slam, some you had to touch. And he said, no, I'm not going to play this. This piano is unplayable. I'm not going to do this. And this little like teenage girl who was putting on this concert convinced him to do it anyways. And so the only reason why it's recorded is so that him and his manager could send that to other booking agents to say, make sure you have a good piano for when I'm there. Because this is what it sounds like. This is what my quality music sounds like on a piano that is broken. And guess what this musical genius did? He navigated and fixed and created this amazing piece of music, a best-selling album on a broken piano, because he was playing it as it was happening. He was making choices and decisions and operating from a different perspective and level than most of us would. See, that's like what God does with us, is I'm a broken piano. I don't sound good. I'm stiff in some areas and too soft in others. But God can make an orchestra, a best-selling album out of my life if I choose to let him. And Jesus is the one convincing and advocating for me to be a masterpiece. We're all broken pianos, but in the hands of the master can be a masterpiece. See, God is making room for the new. Next week, we're going to be looking at Revelation 21, and it says this: Then I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. God is making room for the new. And God is making room for you. God's making room for you. See, John 15:13 says it this way: Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. It's about Jesus. He wants to transform us into a new creation. He wants to remove the old, the dead, and bring up the life inside of us. Jesus died so that your name could be written in that book of life. That was the cause and the reason, the purpose for the life of Jesus was to allow your name to be written in this book of life. And I want to pray right now. If you would bow your heads and close your eyes, please. Jesus, I thank you for laying down your life for mine. Lord, that you took this broken piano and made something beautiful. Jesus, thank you for all of the pianos in this room. Lord, that you laid down your life not just for me, but for each and every one of us. Lord, I pray that if there's anyone in here who has not said yes to you, or they aren't living like they've said yes to you, and they aren't sure that their name is written in the Lamb's book of life, that their name isn't penned in irreversible ink. Lord, if there's a doubt that it's in pencil with an eraser, Lord, if there's any doubt where their name is and where their eternity is destined, Lord, I would pray for a moment of surrender, that we would, if that's you, if you'd lift your hand and you want to say yes to Jesus, you want to, amen. If you want to surrender and you want to be with the Father in paradise, amen. Amen. Yes, Lord. Lord, we thank you for your love. Lord, we ask that you would encourage us and give us a boldness to be someone who gives a reason for the hope we have with love and compassion, Lord, that you would stir in us a heartbreak that reaches people, that helps people find and follow you in our community and in anywhere we have influence, Jesus. Amen.